Hello. In this video I'm going to talk about Rangwe Hunter's advanced features, and specifically a new feature added called aggressive mode. I may end up doing a little bit of rambling at the end as I cover some of the types of recipes necessary for Rangwe Hunter to take advantage of this aggressive state, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so for right now, I'm putting Rangwe Hunter on the chart, getting it put into the right place, getting the scale set, all the things that I'd like to do to make it functional for my next step. Oops, one more thing I forgot. Since it's on the chart, I don't need to see the price action line. Now, before I go further, the median here, the thick black line, this is price average between the low range and the high of the range. So anything below this is undervalued. Anything above the median is overvalued. Now let's see if I can get this right without confusing myself. Anything below the median would be considered oversold. Anything above the median would be considered overbought. But I prefer the context of undervalued, overvalued, because I think it makes more sense with respect to what Rangwe Hunter actually functions as. Now, as you see from this chart, right now ADA is undervalued. And this is a 7-minute chart, and I have been finding that this works very well lately for finding good opportunities. And 7 minutes works out to be a little less than 1 month. I think about 24 days. So here we are. This is the regular state. Now I'm going to put my settings like I normally would. The buy boundary of 6 and the sell boundary of 6. Now, you'll notice, and let me zoom this up real good, the regular state requires purchases to have a crossover. So the closing price has to cross over the boundary line. This is the regular state. So let's turn on aggressive. Now you'll notice every candle under boundary 6 is a purchase. That's because every candle under boundary 6 is undervalued. That may seem strange, and it may be a hot mess to look at. But there's a reason why this is so valuable. By breaking your market range between undervalued and overvalued, you effectively eliminate half of the market. The biggest challenge any trader has in a market is determining the true value of an asset. So by looking at a different time frame, for example here, all of this is overvalued. And we can see overvalued, there's no buy signals. That's the reality of what we want to look at. The asset is simply overvalued. So the 1 hour time frame is not a good place to trade. On the 30-minute time frame, it's mostly overvalued, but it's still beginning to hover close to the median. This is important, because that means it's beginning to return to its proper price value. Again, you see it came down and hovered to the median. That's good. Let's see what the 15-minute chart looks like. Same thing, close to the median, hovering back and forth, mostly overvalued, but some good opportunities are starting to show up. And of course, 5-minute, very much undervalued on the 5-minute. Of course, the 7-minute is also undervalued. But this is a good place to be. This is opportunity. So now, we're going to make one more change. Since I know I am purchasing strictly undervalued assets, I don't need the markers to show up. So I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to put the DCA module on there. And we are going to demonstrate an interesting paradox. Using Rangwe Hunter in this state provides an interesting situation. Okay, now let's pull the DCA module up front. Now, let's turn off all of the unnecessary noise. I'm turning off price action because I can see the raw candles. Now let's link this to Rangwe Hunter. Let's put historic. And let's move this to take profit. Now, I'm not going to mess with any of this right now. I am going to change the colors a little because they're easier for me to see. Okay, so there we are. Let's zoom this up. Okay, maximum 9 positions. 2.9% profit, 64 trades in 1 month period. And you can see the accumulations are doing very good. We're not done yet. I talked about the aggressive state in Jackrabbit's settings area. But what I haven't talked about is the way the deviation is calculated. When your methodology is step, your deviation is based upon the price action, meaning the price itself must go below the deviation boundary. When your methodology is step, the price action is on the basis of the average itself, meaning purchases don't take place unless the average line drops deviation amount. So if you have 2% for your deviation, then your average must drop 2%. for a purchase to take place. So this is using an average deviation, which is why it doesn't have the restraints of the step method. But let's take this one step further. Now, as you can see, this is just insane. This is $1,080 minimum for this one single coin. And remember, price method has no limits. It could be 5,000 plus positions. That is a problem. That is a big problem that we are now going to address. But first, I want this to change. I only want the boundaries to be considered. So I'm going to set my deviation to 5%. That way it stays in line with Range Hunter's boundary scopes. Let's auto-fit this again. So as you can see, 5% keeps it reasonably controlled against the boundaries. And you can see the amount of purchases dropped significantly. But let's come here. 140 purchases. Let's see if I can find from on the right exchange. Okay, yes we are. So 140 purchases. That's brutal. And you'll notice by using Range Hunter, you can see just how much it's kept you out of the market because the market was just overpriced. You don't want to get into the market when the value of the asset is overpriced. So right away, you can see completely eliminated. So using Range Hunter in such a way helps make sure you stay out of an overpriced market. And as you can see, same thing here, when the market dipped, became undervalued, it jumped in and made a quick sale. This is what you want. This is how you want to use Range Hunter. Completely filter out and ignore anything overpriced. But now we can make this more interesting. And this is by no means the only way available. Let's look at Bollinger Bands. Now let's get rid of the signal line. Move to historic. Connect this to Range Hunter. Show the chart. I'm going to go with my classic high-low split channel. Okay, I'm going to go EMA, and I want my upper and lower medians to be 89. The reason I'm picking these numbers is I have found they simply work well. Okay, so let's double check everything. Signal source is Rangwe Hunter. Okay. Now let's modify our dollar cost averaging to point to Bollinger Bands. And there we are. Let's see how it has affected the trading. Okay, doing that simple technique reduced our max purchases per cycle to 7. We are now in a range where the golden equation gives us a reasonable boundary that we can set an exit position with. This makes the price method controllable, and we still limit the market on the basis of only entering when an asset is undervalued. Now we can go further, and in fact I'm going to demonstrate the ATR module being added to this whole situation as a defensive layer. So not only do we look at volatility, but now we are going to look at true range. So let's move to historic. And let's move to plug this in on Bollinger Bands. We want to see the chart. And now we want to get rid of the signal line. Now let's put ATR in aggressive mode. Okay, ATR aggression is yes. And I'm going to change my ATR length to 23. So now we have Bollinger and ATR. Now let's hook it up to the dollar cost averaging module and see if I need to make any tweaks to ATR. Okay, we are going to need to tweak ATR some. We have a buy and we have a sell, so maybe we aren't going to need to tweak ATR some. Okay, let's zoom in on this. So there we are. It got in at a perfect low and got out at a good profit. So let's see how many it actually does. 5 trades a month. So I'll open this up. It makes a 5% average profit and only does one purchase per cycle. Now, we are using price method aggressively. We are using Range Hunter aggressively. But because of Bollinger Bands and average true range, we have brought the whole thing into control using average deviation. This is something you can trade reasonably well with high position sizes, taking advantage of only when an asset is undervalued. Now, I chose boundary 6 because I prefer getting into the market here. But you can be more restrictive and say you only want entries that are around boundary 7 or boundary 8, which is right here. You can limit this to fit your risk assessment very well, and for coins that are lesser quality will produce some incredible results. This is just the beginning of what the advanced and aggressive features of Range Hunter are capable of. Let's see what other coins are like. Let's zoom this in again. 3%, 2 positions per trade cycle. That's not bad. Again, very controlled, very reasonable. And Algo has a history that just isn't that great. Okay, this coin is out of sorts, so let's see. Here we are. Another low quality coin that does very well. There are a lot of ways and resources to really capitalize. And this really only is just the beginning of what is possible by using an overbought or overvalued, undervalued approach to the market. By literally removing half of the market from the picture of your purchases, you get a better and clearer idea of any market at any given time. And you don't run the risk of having your recipe purchased when the market is up here, because you don't know where the market might be. So as you can see, there really is good opportunities. And by picking any of these unique time frames, 7-minute, 11-minute, 13-minute, 17-minute. The one thing you have to be careful with 11-minute, because it's right after the 10-minute threshold, you don't want to get what's called the leftovers. So I wouldn't recommend trading it, but the 13-minute is just as good. It's in between the 10 and the 15, so it creates its own opportunities. Now let's get to BTC. How many people purchased when it was up here thinking it was going to go up? A lot. But if they'd had Range Hunter, they could have very easily have known that the market was at a high. Let's switch to a higher time frame. Now, here we are. We are at the high. How many people bought here and then ended up being stuck in a position? Very, very many. But this clearly shows you overvalued. Don't buy, don't get in, completely stay out of the market. Undervalued, worth looking at. Overvalued, not worth looking at. And as we can see from this market, nothing really strikes a chord with any of it. So it's not even trying to analyze it because there's not enough in this market to get a good, thorough analysis. Here we have enough, and it produced one trade cycle. And you can see how long it took. And let's double check the settings. See, very simple settings. So going back to the 7 minute, 1 month's worth. 4 trade cycles on BTC. And it's undervalued right now. Even if you wanted to dabble in the more riskier coins, they'd have a very unfriendly market. This approach, Bollinger's and average true range, can give you some very good entries. Entries that can be quite reliable and consistent. If you wanted to, you could couple momentum in on this. There are a lot of ways to really advance this. Or we can go with trend. Let's see if this will even work. It might not. It might be overkill. Historic. Turn off price action. Show chart. Now, let's zoom in and see if we can get a calibration. Okay, we need to use ATR. Okay, so let's look at this. Okay, let's add 3. Let's see if this gives us the calibration we need. Nope, we're way off. Okay, so that should be maybe 10. Candlesticks are further away than they really look. All right, 10, 9, 8. 6. All right, so let's link to ATR. And now let's link DCA to ADX. And let's see what kind of results this produces.
So, Bobby, did you get it?
Okay. Now this looks like a very big hot mess. And really it is. You don't need to get this complicated. But you can. It just depends on the coin you are trading and what you are looking for. This is just one of literally 1,000 different possibilities that you can do to build a recipe that can go from a total insanity to literally purchasing at the right time and walking away with a good profit on a coin that is just absolute bottom of the barrel, worst there is. There are a lot of coins that you can use this on, and they all do very well. When you're using Range Hunter's aggressive state, whether you choose to use it by itself or as I'm doing, as a hedge against overvalued assets, both work well either standalone or as a part of a bigger picture. And that really is what this is all about, is a bigger picture. And how much risk do you want to eliminate? Range Hunter by itself eliminates 50% of the risk right out the door. So right off the top, 50% of the risk is gone because you can focus on only undervalued assets. You can also focus on assets that normally don't trade very well, meaning they're very poor, very low quality, or they have a tumultuously difficult history. EOS is a good example of a coin that is just very difficult to deal with. Getting out of it is a nightmare when you get into it. And I can tell you this from personal experience because I have a position that I just can't get to go away. I've managed to reverse trade 3 positions out, and every time I get to a certain point, it drops more. So it's not at the bottom of its downcline. But when it does, reverse trading it is going to be a good way not to lose anything. As you can see, we can go on through every coin in the system, and you will see how using this approach can dwindle down an incredibly aggressive state into something that is manageable. Again, I'm going to emphasize, you do not need to build recipes this advanced and this complicated. You can, as I've done here, to demonstrate the filtration process but you don't have to. There are a lot of different ways of filtering, including one of the easiest, which is simply changing your deviation. For example, I'm using a 5% deviation across the board, but I could just as easily use 20. And if it was an aggressive approach that required multiple positions, this would work well. For this particular recipe, though, the combinations are simply too much. Now, the more elaborate the recipe, the more likely you're not going to see much activity on lower time frames. You may see it, but you may not, simply because the recipe is going to require longer than the time frame to function. Now, that isn't a problem for the back end of your alerts. The dollar cost averaging module will remember whatever it needs to properly complete the trade. But your front end results may look strange from time to time. So that is something to take into consideration when you're working on a recipe that might need 7 days to function, but you might only get 3 days of history. So be sure you balance your expectations appropriate to the amount of work that you base your recipe on. More elaborate recipes require more time. More simplified recipes can function in shorter time frames. You can reduce dollar cost averaging to a one-hit wonder very easily, but it is not going to work on a rapid rate suitable for scalping. Instead, it will work on a rate capable of pulling off $1,000 positions, because it will be very little, if any, accumulation. So, always test, evaluate, and look at your markets carefully. If you're just starting with Jackrabbit, follow the examples in the Jackrabbit settings area. Look at them, watch the videos. The savings account is a wonderful place to start if you're looking to step up your trading and move to bigger position sizes. Look into more elaborate constructs like this. And most importantly, remember, don't rush any of this process. Fear of missing out is only preached by people trying to take your money. No matter what state the market is in, short of a complete and total apocalypse, there is always going to be opportunities. If you miss one opportunity, patiently wait for the next one. Don't dwell on things you've missed, because that causes mistakes. The thinking process of you trading must be a very clear mindset that requires patience, diligence, research, and understanding. Take your time. Whether you are seasoned or an expert, the market, especially lately, has been very unforgiving. Don't be the few that have been liquidated because you didn't plan properly. Don't be in a rush to lose your money. There is always tomorrow when it comes to trading. The only time that may be different and an exception is if you are trying to live strictly on your trading, in which case you already know how difficult that is to begin with. If you're just starting to practice living on your trading, it's a difficult road to be in. I'm fortunate enough that my trading is a hobby and a leisure. Some people, their trading is part of their basic income. That requires a different mindset. That requires more knowledge, more practice, and more deliberation on their next move. It's not something that happens overnight, and it is something that every single trader can develop if they don't have it. But you're not going to start in the beginning. In the beginning, the first thing you must master is not losing your money. Once you've mastered that, then you can learn how to make money. Jackrabbit is blessed with a few subscribers that are expert traders, and we have quite a few that are beginning traders. So we have a wide spectrum of knowledge, and it is important that you use the support server to educate yourself as much as possible if you are a beginner. This information is part of the service. Don't neglect it. Knowledge is everything, and the more informed you are, the better your decision-making process is going to be, which is going to help you make better trades. Jackrabbit is just simply a tool chest of tools. There are a lot of things you can build with these tools. But at the end of the day, they still are tools that take time to learn and master. This simple mock-up is just one way of mastering it. Figuring out how to put the pieces together oftentimes leads to charts that do very well that I never thought would work in the first place. It really is trial and error with many regards. Sometimes you get lucky and you get a gold mine like this one that just does well and it hits all the proper points. Sometimes you end up with something that can do wonderful but is well above your budget. Always focus on your budget and risks. Once you've figured out those two, everything else is easy. Be sure to like, hit that notification bell if you haven't already. If you know somebody that would benefit from this video, send them the link. And as always, if you have any questions, ask them, whether it's in the support server or in the comments section. There are no stupid questions, especially when you have real money that you can lose. Be sure you ask questions if anything is on the screen that you don't understand. Until next time.